Hey all, Ron here from Military Images Magazine with a new episode of Life on the Civil War Research Trail. The thought of soldiers on one side of a Civil War battle helping their wounded foes on the other side after the fighting is over can be a source of fascination for those of us who look and read such accounts in primary sources. The very idea of soldiers who had just blasted away at each other with muskets, carbines, and cannon, or attacked each other with slashing swords and drawn revolvers, to almost immediately lay down their arms and aid their stricken foemen seems absolutely incredible. And yet it happened. As much as it strains our comprehension today, it also seemed unimaginable to those who were there. There's one account I want to share with you today. It's by Captain Amos Mitchell Judson of the 83rd Pennsylvania Infantry. He and his men assisted wounded Alabamians of Brigadier General Evander M. Law's brigade at Gettysburg after the fighting around Little Round Top on July 2nd, 1863. Judson, he's pictured here, his life dates are 1826 to 1913, began his service in the 83rd in April 1861, right after Fort Sumter, as a first lieutenant, and survived the war ending as the regiment's major in 1865. He also had a brevet or honorary rank of lieutenant colonel. The anecdote I want to share appears in his 1865 book, written just after the war. The title of the book is History of the 83rd Regiment, Pennsylvania Volunteers. Before I get to the passage, I want to share the dedication because I think it's particularly worthy of note. It says, or Judson says, to the memory of the gallant dead of the 83rd who have fallen in battle or died of wounds and disease in behalf of the great principles of human freedom and in the defense of the American Union, this history is reverently inscribed by one of their surviving companions in arms. Now, to the passage. It begins late in the evening of July 2nd on the battlefield near Little Round Top, where those Alabamians of Law's brigade tried several times and failed to take the heights. So here we go. Quote, by 10 o'clock at night, the detachments had buried most of our own dead and brought in our wounded and a greater portion of the rebel wounded. A number of the latter, however, laid between our line of skirmishers and that of the enemy. As the enemy fired in the dark upon every object they saw approach, our men could not render assistance to as many as they would otherwise have done. Many had received severe and painful wounds, and their ceaseless cries for help, breaking upon the stillness of the night, sent a thrill to the heart of many a brave soldier of the 83rd. For I have always noticed that the men of that regiment, although they never had any compunction of conscience in their treatment of an attacking foe, yet the moment the foe were prostrate and helpless at their feet, they would throw away their guns and everything else to render them assistance. Among the number brought in, I remember a fine-looking young rebel sergeant who had had the bone of his right thigh broke by a Minié bullet. Our men had, at the risk of their lives, ventured out and brought him and another wounded rebel soldier in their arms and laid them down under some trees up on a rise of ground some 50 yards from where I was resting. As no stretchers were left upon the field, they could not carry them back to the hospitals, which were 2 or 3 miles to the rear. Their wounds were torturing them, and, attracted by their groans, I went towards the spot and found them lying upon their blankets in a pool of blood, their limbs shivering with the cool night air, and the young sergeant incapable of moving without wrenching his broken bone so as to send a thrill of agony through his whole body. He was a manly young fellow of finely molded features and well shaped limbs, apparently about 21, and evidently descended of gentle blood. "Oh, sir," he exclaimed brokenly, "I am glad you have come to my assistance. Will you please give me a drink of water and help me to turn over? I am lying on my broken limb and cannot help myself." "Fortunately," Judson said, "I had a canteen of water by my side and applied it to the lips of these suffering men. I then went in search of help, for I could not lift them alone. Having found a soldier to assist me, we returned and did the best we could for them. We made a nice, soft bed of leaves, large enough for both, and then bathed and bound up their wounds with our handkerchiefs. We then took one of the blankets of his comrade, which was not so bloody, and spread it upon the bed of leaves, and put their knapsacks at the head for pillows. As we took hold of the young man to lift him to his new bed, he shrieked in agony, 'Oh, men, for God's sake, do me careful. Oh, my mother!' That appeal was enough to rift the heart of stone. But we performed the office as carefully as we could, being obliged to support his mangled limb without jarring it at the same time that we lifted his body from the ground. We succeeded in laying him down in an easy position upon the bed of leaves, and he seemed to feel at once that his sufferings were relieved. We then laid his comrade, who was wounded in the breast, by his side, and covered them both with a clean blanket which we found lying near. The wounded men seemed to feel grateful and expressed their sense of gratitude for the treatment they had received, for they had not expected it from those whom they supposed to be their enemies. We told them that they need not feel themselves under obligations for anything we had done, for though we might be foes on the field of battle, yet it was no more than the duty of every soldier to give assistance to a fallen foe in the hour of his misfortune. We then offered them some rations from our haversacks, such as we had, but they were in no condition to eat them. The sergeant said he would ask one more kindness of us, and that was to get them carried to a hospital as soon as possible, where their wounds might be attended to. We promised to do so, and at once started off on our mission. "Thank you, gentlemen," said the young man gratefully as he fell into a fitful slumber while we moved away. It was some time before we could accomplish this mission, and I returned several times during the interval to administer draughts of water to them and to assure them that they would be attended to before long. And I had the satisfaction of knowing that before an hour elapsed, they had both been carried to a hospital where I trust their wounds were properly taken care of, and that they lived to repent and abandon the errors of their ways. So, there you have the story, an absolutely eyewitness account told by the man pictured here, Captain Amos Mitchell Judson of the 83rd Pennsylvania Infantry, of the immediate aftermath of the fighting on Little Round Top while the skirmishers were still active on both sides and rescuing fallen Confederate soldiers. Thanks for listening. We'll see you on the next episode of Life on the Civil War Research Trail.